Oh man, don't push the record button too quickly. I already forgot half of what I was going to say for this one. I had a few little jokes in my head, but they seem to have gone. That's what happens when you get up to get a cup of tea. Anyway, AI Apocalypso. I had quite a few things in my head when I wrote that title, but I'll leave you to fill that in. It's more fun if you can think of all the illusions for yourself. Speaking of illusions, illusions. I have a note to say about that in a minute. Anyway, there was a movie by that name, wasn't there? Was it? Was that Aussie guy, Road Warrior guy? Who cares? He made an okay movie at one stage about the Europeans invading the Americas. Action movie, but whatever. The point today is to have a little rant about the baselessness of the fears that people have concerning artificial intelligence and other apocalypses, although I don't think I'll get around to the other apocalypses. And, climate change is not a done deal. It's just incredibly damn scary. Because it's such a long-term thing and there's so many unknowns and uncertainties and just in complete madness. Green fascism is probably what I'd worry about. Anyway, there are fears, of course, so maybe we'll mention those a little bit too, both being important. Civics education, I think. It's no good to give kids just all the doom and gloom without giving them some, scientific, rational, but also just basic moral civic duty education as well, because we can get ourselves out of these troubles because they're troubles that we created. It seems to defy the Einstein logic, right? That, well, we created all these problems. So you get these, green fascists and weirdos who think, well, we've got to get rid of humans, replace us with AI because, like the Mars King, so that quote unquote consciousness can persist in the universe. I can't begin to describe the insanity of all that. But I think, there are people who just want to extinct humanity because we are a scourge and a cancer. Agent Smith. I often had the handle on some social media, Smith will suffice, as a bit of a joke there. Agent Smith from the Matrix being, humans are a cancer and a plague. Well, we're not, and we are the solution to our own problems because, we are not the cretins who created the problems. Humans didn't create the problems. It's just that some humans did, right? Humanity didn't create the problem. It's not the fault of humanity, nor of civilization. It's the fault of a few powerful, decrepit humans who are really anti-civilization, obviously. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? Tautologically, they're anti-civilization. I mean, they're for their own civilization of upper-class aristocratic knobs. But, that's anti-civilization of everyone else. And anti-civilization in any decent sense of the word. So we are the solution to the problem, even though there were humans who created all these problems. Yeah, this is the Ursula Le Guin logic of whatever man created, a woman can uncreate. So that defeats or counters the Einstein logic of you can't solve a problem with the thinking that created the problem in the first place. Einstein's is a scientific thinking framing, not a civilizational framing. Civilizations and society, you've got to think Ursula Le Guin. What did I say here? It's not a topic for today, and I think it is the topic. Do I have to change that? Anyway, the AI apocalypse, I think, is a false-framed giant ball of poopiness. So just, don't step in it. Keep your heels clean. Machine automation, you see, is not an unemployment story. And I think probably that's what most people worry about. I don't think really any sane people are worried about the AI singularity. It's really a niche, weird online nerd thing. Yeah. You don't want to go there. Look, but if you do want to go there, look into this group called the Rationalists and Rocco's Basilisk. I think it's ROKO. It's the name of a dude who hypothesized that in the future there will be this AI superintelligence who will be our overlord, and it will know all the history, and so it will punish anyone who doesn't reward it in our present. Who anyone who's like a Luddite or anti-progress person or anti-technology person will get punished by this future hypothetical being. It's like these people call themselves the Rationalists. Yeah, it's just insane. And I've seen some YouTube influencers boost these Rationalists, and they're kind of otherwise, I don't know, banal, unthreatening, sort of normal science channels. So any of you guys out there, mostly guys, who think science is like great and engineers are great, if I could reach my hand into the screen and slap you very hard, I probably would. Yeah, so anyway, the only little point I wanted to make today is that machine automation is not an unemployment story, so don't let anyone get away with saying it is. And machine automation is, of course, always a labour emancipation story, and if it's not too electricity hungry, it's also a productivity gain story. And that's something you'd think that most people, or most progressives, scream that they want. They want to work less. They want their damn UBI. Tax cut is a UBI. You don't fucking need a UBI. The source of all unemployment is defined as people seeking to exchange their labour for tax credits. Source is government. The source of unemployment is the government. Sorry. Brain glitch just there for a minute. That's what happens when you try and read back your own words without looking at them. I should probably read this. What am I saying? Yeah, so the government can always eliminate all the unemployment they generate by design. But, of course, the government do not know that yet, that they generate unemployment by design, right? They're all ignorant of this fact. It's a curious thing, isn't it? MMT reveals this truth, but it's like, I don't know, did anyone ever really understand this? I have a feeling that Keynes and a few others did understand it. Obviously Marx had no clue. Most economists have had no clue. But I think, I'm not an historian, okay, but I can imagine that in the past, all the, smart authorities, like the powers behind the throne, knew damn well that what they were doing with taxes. They were creating unemployment. They may not have called it unemployment. They may have understood it was creating a need for the score points. But I'm pretty sure that they understood the whole purpose was to get people into the army. So, yeah. So in other words, MMT again is nothing new. Not much that's new in MMT. It was all understood in the past, but modern governments don't understand it, and people shrink. Right? I think a lot of liberals shrink away from this. They don't want to think that the government is coercive. They don't want to think that taxation is coercive. They want to think it's like paying for the government or paying for public services. They're scared to admit the truth. In fact, some of them are just it just bounces off them, I think. Yeah, I've got a lot I could say about that, but that wasn't for today. So I think, I would say don't worry about the real politic here. People will say, oh, you're ignoring the facts on the ground. You're ignoring the reality of it all. You can make that all go away, because there are certainly facts that the government doesn't understand what it is doing when it imposes taxes. But don't cave into the real politic. Don't just roll up into a ball and die. Because if you do, then I'd say just, good riddance to you. Piss off to Mars again. Because you know half it all. You're spiritually dead if you just give up. This is part of what today's post is going to be about. So yeah, you can go and scream with your hair on fire about the AI apocalypse. Someone else's go and do that in someone else's comment section, though, not in mine. I know all the real politic. I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in getting beyond it. Okay, that's the whole point. That's why I write these things. I know it comes across a bit as a little bit Pollyanna-ish and a bit like, oh, you're a statist, you're for big government. But like I explained in a previous post, no, I'm not. I'm in favor of very small government. Because when you have a really good quality government, it just doesn't need to be very big. It needs to be fiscally big because, it's going to employ a whole lot of people into the public sector. But, those people aren't the government necessarily. They're not the central government. They're the distributed government. It's people running the society that we all want. During their work hours, they're part of government, if you like, or part of the public sector, so to speak. But when they go home, they're back, in the private sector. So it's like all of it. It's a whole holistic thing. I really don't like the distinction between private and public sector, but it's an okay organizing principle to distinguish the two sectors because they are very different monetarily speaking, right? So there is a sharp definitional distinction there to be made. One sector creates the tax credits for the taxpayer. The other sector circulates those tax credits to run the private sector and commerce and so forth and markets until they get deleted by payment of tax. So what about apocalypse then? I think it's an allegory. This idea of the end of the world. Well, what can I say? It's biblical. What does that mean? Well, it means it's allegorical, I think. I would interpret it as meaning, death of the old and birth of the new, which is a good thing. It means that, in fact, it's also a real thing. It's happening right now. What you see in most news media, I would suggest, okay, this is just my opinion. You can trample on me and beat me up for being too naive and unrealistic, but I would say you're the ones being naive and unrealistic because you can see a lot of good stuff happening in the world. It's just that, when decrepit institutions die, it's not a peaceful process necessarily. So, because a lot of people just want to hang on to their power. So what's happening there is a spiritual transformation. You got to look hard for it maybe at the moment to find it, but it is happening. Because when old institutions die, it creates room and space in all sorts of ways, physically and intellectually and otherwise, for other good things to happen. Maybe the bad stuff gets replaced by even worse stuff. That's also a possibility, that the death of the old brings in even more worse stuff. I would say that happens as well, but it's not. I don't think it's the norm. So I think the apocalypse is a good thing. But if you think that capitalism dying off is really bad and it's like a crisis, well, I don't know what to tell you. I would just say that innocent people dying and getting murdered in the millions because of this death drive of capitalism process, well, it's just horrific and too slow for me. It's agonizingly slow. It almost makes you want to think about accelerationism. Rip the band-aid off real quick. But that's going to also cause millions of people to die. So it's a bit of a trolley problem, isn't it? But it's a trolley problem where you don't have the numbers. So I think it's just really foolish to go the accelerationist route. Because you just never know, If you try the peaceful route, it just may work. It just might work out. So I think this system that we call labour exploitation, let's not even call it capitalism because that gets conflated with, money markets and things like that. I think that's a wrong characterization. That's not what we want to get rid of, right? You want to get rid of the predatory financial sector. But part of that is getting rid of labour exploitation. If no one's free to exploit labour, then, well, I don't have the logic for this worked out fully, but I think that would mean that the parasitic financial sector just goes away, or at least it becomes a bit more like cryptocurrency. It's just dupe a dope. You're only going to get hurt by that if you get into it. So just don't get into it. Okay, but most people don't have an option about the labour market. They have to enter the labour market, which is a grossly unjust, unfair system. I know Warren Mosler calls it an unfair game, but it's a bit cringe to call it a game, right? It's real life and death imposed by government. So anyway, that has to go. And if I thought it would help, I'd damn well sacrifice my whole life for that. I don't mean, die for it, although I'd probably do. I would sacrifice all my time, all my life. And yeah, if I had to become a martyr for that, then I would. Obviously, it's just not even something I'd even have a second thought about. That's how bad I think, the system is, really. And it's all relative. Back in the feudal times, it was far worse. But I think, relative good and evil is the thing. So the point of living is to get rid of injustice today, not worry about how bad it was or compared to the past. That's just decrepit thinking. Decrepit seems to be my favourite word this year. It's a good word, Blackadder. So yeah, back on topic. I was listening to this other podcast, which was a bit doomerist. So I thought, well, I like to be anti-doomer, but realistic about it. So I'm really screaming out that what I do on Ohanga Pai is I don't really write for you people who are listening and reading me. I'm writing for the future people. I guess I've got a soft spot for ex-geners, right? Anyone who's immune to advertising. They're my kind of people. But all the generations, I think they're all too propagandized and hard to reach people who've already got baked in ideas about UBI and nonsense like that. We just need those people to, die off, have funerals. So what I want to reach is the youth of tomorrow who maybe won't be getting all the metaphors that I use, but it makes me wonder why I write the way I write. I guess I just can't help it. It's just in my blood, in my fingers, in my brain. But it's the youth of tomorrow, kids who haven't really even started school yet, I imagine. They're going to have the can that we're kicking down the road. So they're the ones that are going to have to give up a lot of little living day-to-day luxuries that we enjoy. Not that they'll have to not, have them or produce them. It's just that they won't have time because there'll be too much work to do to quote-unquote save the planet. Although, if you listen to some economists, transitioning to green energy and doing a Green New Deal and all that would not be as much work as fighting World War II, right, in relative terms. I don't know about that, but I'd say, I could believe that. So, maybe the future generation aren't really going to have to give up all that much at all, really. That's one of the baseless fears, right? Are you going to have to give up playing your golf and table tennis or Xbox? I don't really think so. So, but, worst case scenario, maybe they will have to give up a few of these things because they'll be too damn busy, trying to quote-unquote save the planet. We can imagine the worst case scenario without getting all sort of scared to death about it. So it's more the AI thing, the anti-technology thing that I've been simmering away with me for a while. Sometimes it spills over into my blog posts. But yeah, the other day I heard an interview with this lady called Nina Burley. I think she's a journalist, a lawyer or something, I don't know. But had an interesting chat with a journalist, John Richardson, on the subject of Luigi and how Luigi is basically a revolutionary, not a terrorist. And of course you don't get any argument from me there, though I've always thought that you can be a reactionary, I've always thought, you can be a revolutionary and then you can be an idiot revolutionary. Why would you want to be the latter? So anyway, apparently he'd done interviews with Luigi, and this led Richardson to read more about Ted Kaczynski, because I think Luigi was inspired a bit by Kaczynski. What? Because Luigi was inspired by Kaczynski, I think. Apparently he had read Kaczynski and had thought the guy was a bit mad, and that there were better ways to kind of do what Kaczynski was trying to do. So it was quite ironic that Luigi ended up killing someone. But of course his rationale was that he wasn't indiscriminately killing. A lot of the Unabomber's victims were like just secretaries who were opening up parcels, getting their hands blown off, that sort of thing. So apparently Richardson came to realize that there might have been some wisdom to Uncle Ted, the terrorist Unabomber, albeit squeezed through the insanity juices of extreme nerd materialism and almost obscene, ignorant pseudo-intellectualism. So Richardson mentioned that he had a contact at Fox News, and I gather that the Fox News person was complaining that maybe Richardson's bylines were too doomer, quote-unquote doomer for the audience. And I guess the advertisers, of course that's a bit disingenuous, right? It's always all about the advertisers. And I think Richardson responded something like, yeah, but all your news talk on Fox is all doomerism too. Which I think is a fair point, right? For a fair and balanced media propagandist outfit. Maybe it's just me, but I had a comment to make, which is for Nina's Substack, that it's still idiotic doomerism from this guy Richardson. He was persuaded by a lot of the fear-mongering. And the thing is, though, it's not that his Fox News contact had it any better, because it's 1,000 times more nihilistic to think that there is no need for doomerism. I'll say that again. It's 1,000 times more nihilistic to think that there is no need for nihilism. What do I mean? Well, you're denying ordinary people's legitimate fears and their lack of control over their own puny lives. And it's basically an injustice. So I've never been nihilistic or doomerist. I've always been acutely depressed and aware that we have injustices. And so the problem is to find a way to form a decent, just society. That's the way to get rid of nihilism and doomerism. Work on the positive side of things. So doomerism and nihilism to me are idiotic, but the failure to appreciate that doomerism is legitimate for people who can't see a way towards justice, to not appreciate their fears and their psychology, that's far worse. So I'd say a pox on Fox News and all their ilk. Okay, but nonetheless, it is a lack of imagination to be giving up hope. And I don't put it all down to materialism, but a lot of it comes down to materialism, a false ideology that spawns a lot of these pseudo-Kaczynskiites. Materialism is deep prejudice of our times, and I would just say probably you're right now unconsciously biased in your thinking right now, right this very second, listening to me, if you're still listening, because you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But materialism, this idea that we just live in a physical universe and there is nothing else, fuels a false thesis that machines can be conscious, because if we are conscious then, and we're just physical stuff, we're just material, then obviously there's nothing stopping machines from being conscious as well. But you've got to look at the process. The machines are running a deterministic algorithm. Even if they use pseudo-random number generators, there's still deterministic algorithm, because you can rerun them again and get pretty much the same output, up to your pseudo-random number generator, of course. You can't do that with humans. We're not like that. And so the machines cannot be conscious, as commonly understood. But it's not just about the determinism or algorithm or quantum mechanics. It's not really a quantum mechanics story. Quantum mechanics is a result of certain ways that the physical universe evolves in time. But consciousness is something way beyond that. It's about our mental qualia, the thoughts in your head. They're obviously not physical. You can't produce these things through any physical process whatsoever. Because a physical process, there's nothing what it is like to be a physical process. You don't know what it is like to be a machine because there is nothing like it is to be a machine. So I do, quote unquote, get it that the tech nerds and the cretins like Geoffrey Hinton have a completely different definition of quote unquote consciousness and quote unquote intelligence. Namely, their definition is purely in input-output behavioral terms. They think, that what the machine does is what indicates that it's intelligent or consciousness. Of course, that's behavioralism, which was long ago debunked, but, it's enjoying a modern revival. And, of course, it's just brainworms. It is brainworms. It's not just my opinion. Of course, it's only my opinion. Don't get all uptight about it. It's just that I'm correct and you guys are wrong. To talk about these existential threats, I think, is not Doomerism. It's not Doomerism to talk about them. You've got to acknowledge what people's fears are and address them. So, I'd say that the only nihilists who are ever of any help are those who overcome their nihilism, at least for some of the time. Don't begrudge anyone their nihilism or doomerism. It's quite justified as far as I can tell, especially if you don't have a spiritual worldview. Why would you not be a doomer in that case, right? So don't have just a materialistic worldview. Expand your worldview. Learn to love people. Learn to love people even if they're real assholes. You don't have to buddy up with them and get close to them all the time, and French taunting them to death, metaphorically, is, a loving thing to do sometimes, I reckon. Anyway, if the motive is pure. So I was writing to Nina. This is probably something that I actually posted under the comments section there, but it's pointed out that I am a neo-Luddite. I think I am. I don't know. I'll self-characterize myself as a neo-Luddite, okay? But I'm also a math nerd, and I love my computer and my GNU plus Linux distro and all the rest. So, but I'm just completely opposed to the Luigi and Ted Kaczynski tactics. Don't you think it would be far more powerful to just paint bomb the capitalist rentier parasites, blood red paint and all that, ridicule them, let them live? I think it's far more powerful. Plus, then millions of people can participate in that. Mass action. This is labour organisation. You do it by the masses, not by some technocratic union bosses. Okay, you don't let the bosses run anything. Workers take control. Millions of workers can, undertake paint bomb actions. And by paint bombs, you know what I mean, graffiti, destroying their Tesla automobiles or whatever it is. Okay, maybe I wouldn't advocate, outright vandalism, but you can do things like that, I think, that are legitimized. And I won't be telling anyone to break the law, but it's up to you and me if we feel the need to break the law to engage in some sort of civil disobedience. It's not for any boss, especially not union bosses, to tell you what's good and what's not good. It's a judgment you have to make for yourself, I think. Again, all you well-educated, credentialed elites listening to this have your own opinions on that already. I'm trying to speak here to the younger audience who, have only got half-formed thoughts about social justice right now. We can always turn a machine off at the wall socket. Don't think you're losing humanity when you shut down a machine or an emoji. And I think if you think otherwise, you're just truly insane and captured by the ideology of materialism. The problem, as ever, is with the powerful elites and the oligarchs who control the means of production. Sound too Marxist commie for you? I just have to laugh at people who call me a commie. Anyway, the means of production, and also increasingly the means of proprietorially copying the software that the naive as heck nerds have already written. Paint bomb them to metaphorical death. They can afford the dry cleaning bill. Get their PAs to go and buy a new suit, of course. They never bother with the dry cleaning bill. Or these days the fascists are more likely to be the ones buying the cool leather jackets. Who else can afford them? Yeah, there's a lot more to write about this AI and stuff like that, but maybe for another day. The whole paradigm of quote-unquote artificial intelligence and quote-unquote machine consciousness, it's all just completely nuts. But yeah, when I can risk coming across as a bit of a clown, neo-Luddite, I think. And so to avoid that, it all needs a whole lot of philosophical backing, and my feeling is most people aren't prepared to think about it that deeply. So it's really not something I write a lot about in public or publish on social media platforms, because without the philosophical backing, it's all just sort of sounds like personal opinion, and it's just, one person's view versus another person's view, and it's like, are equally valid views, etc., etc. Which, pointless debate, maybe? I don't know. What I really loathe are philosophical ideologues who think they've got it all figured out, whether they're idealists or materialists or theologians or whatever. I mean, who are they to tell us what's right and what's wrong and what's true and what's false? But, most especially the atheists, so condescending. Most especially those trying to tell everyone else what to think, as if they're the genius beacons of truth because they, quote-unquote, know some science. God, they just got no clue. Maybe they've got a nano clue. I don't know. Darwinian evolution is a damn thing. The Big Bang really did kind of happen in one way or another. But otherwise, complete lunatics, these materialist atheists. Worse than the fake religionists, I reckon, because at least with people who are fake religion, like, your Christian fascists, your Buddhist militant nationalists, or your right-wing Zionists, at least their hypocrisy is transparent, right? They're all very deeply anti-religious. Anyone who really screams, religion, God, country, they're usually the ones that are the least religious. Okay. Anyway, you probably now can understand why I don't write too much on social media about any of this, because people's deeply held worldviews are really your own to mature and develop, not mine or anyone else's to influence. Definitely not some clergy, unless you ask for it, unless you've got, no imagination or thought of your own. If you're illiterate, I can teach you to read, but I don't want to teach you what to think. So it's when these issues of social justice impinge upon society that I think I have to do something and speak out or write out about it. And that's just as a simple moral obligation. That's what I'm doing today. You can ignore me. I don't care. I just have to say it. And, of course, regardless of whoever's eyes or ears I can reach. The machine algorithm fears are baseless. The fear of the power elites is not. So just stop using their software. It doesn't disempower you if you stop using their software. What does ChatGPT or any of these other programs, what does it really do for you? Honestly, have a think about it. You still got to think for yourself to understand the damn output of these machines. If it speeds up your internet search, okay, maybe that's a good speed advantage. But reading a good, decently well-written book slowly, I think, is much better quality of knowledge and less liable to be, fake news or just, some statistically, on average, truthiness kind of output from a machine. Read a good author and read an author who is really putting some passion into it, even if they're a damn Nazi, because you might learn something about how they think and how to defeat them, perhaps. I've never done that myself because I just can't stand the stuff. It makes me ill, violently ill. So, but some researchers do that sort of thing, and maybe listen to them because they'll have an impassioned plea, anti-fascist plea that is a good thing to listen to. I think, at least in our times, right? It's a damn shame that we're having to listen to the anti-fascist messages. It's like stuff you don't really want to have to bother listening to. you want to have some tips on how to grow your own garden vegetables. That's what you want to listen to. Anyway, that's all for today.